Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. And today's guest is Dondi Scumaci. Dondi, hello.
Hello. You said that beautifully.
Thank you. I love your last name. It's amazing. I'm so happy to have you as a guest. And, even before I introduce you, I would like to give a big shout out to Bob Berg for introducing us. You were a guest speaker on the Go Giver community platform, and I heard you there, and Bob said, you got to talk to Dondi. She will be perfect as a guest on your podcast. And guess what? He's right.
He's amazing. What an amazing connector of people. Really, that community is just brilliant.
Absolutely. I mean, I joined the Go Giver community and I met so many wonderful people there. And Bob is for those of you that don't know who Bob Berg is, which I don't think there are a lot of people that don't know, but check the Go Giver book. And after you read that book or listen to it on Audible, I'm sure you're going to fall in love with that book. It's amazingly easy to read, such amazing concepts. And then you will realize, in real life, I can tell you, Bob lives exactly by the principles that he outlines in that book. He's such an amazing connector, such a go-giver. So thank you, Bob.
Yes.
And now, Dondi, you are amazing. I have to introduce you. I hope I will introduce you correctly with everything that you do. I mean, I have a whole bio here, but, let's say right now, let's start with saying that right now you're the president of Dondi Scumaci, Inc. And you have many, many years in the financial industry. So hands-on, being an executive, knowing how to run people, how to actually, you worked there, how things are being done. And then you transition to consultancy and helping other business grow. And, you have your book with the bestseller book is Designed for Success, the 10 Commandments for Women in the Workplace, which is a bestseller. It's an incredible book. I highly recommend that our listeners get it and read it. And you have, of course, other books as well. And you are known for your high energy seminars all over the globe and helping businesses thrive, succeed, and basically you deliver solid, actionable disciplines for employees and executives alike, right? So people go to your workshops and they come out of there with actionable things that they can do in order to improve and to become better leaders, better executives, grow personally, business-wise, professionally. So anything else I missed that you would like
beautiful.
to say?
You did a great job. Thank you for all of that. That's exactly what I do. And that's what I'm passionate about, that whole idea of helping people step into the future that they seek, right? Whether you're building a business or whether you're building your own brand, whether you're a mentor to others, that you would be able to fulfill that and find your wins, right? Achieve things that are really meaningful. So a lot of the work I'm doing right now, and speaking of like the whole systems idea, is around engagement. Like, what are the systems that create engagement? Because the workforce has never been more disengaged, right? And so what are we doing about that? So that's one of the big thrusts of my work right now.
That's beautiful. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the systems for engagement. I love that. So let's first of all talk about what does it mean in terms of engagement? What does it mean to be engaged at work, engaged with your customers, your clients, your employees? So how do you define engagement?
I think for me, engagement is that it's individualized, right? It's like a one size fits one, because we find engagement where we find meaning and purpose in our work, where it's not it's purpose filled, right? And so even though we have tasks that we're doing, and hopefully consistently doing, there's a purpose behind those. I think that engagement taps into the discretionary effort, the discretionary wisdom. It's a little bit like after we pay all of the bills every month. What's left over is the discretionary. I can do whatever I want with that. I can save it, I can spend it, I can invest it. And so people have discretionary effort. And the thing that's really interesting about that is we cannot pry it out of them. Once the bare minimums have been met, how do we invite them to release that potential? How do we invite them to release that? And that, to me, that's the whole, how do we fuel engagement? How do we tap into that piece where people are finding real meaning in the work that they're doing? It's meaningful for them.
I love that definition, like in terms of like the engagement is basically being connected, being involved, and make it meaningful, make work meaningful, right? Because, you can argue that the bare minimum is not even going to be able to be done if there is no engagement, or there is no good interest, or there is it's not meaningful, because people are not robots. They won't be able to just come to work, do this, do, and go home, right? They will have to have everything and be surrounding that actually has meaning. So I love that definition. So let's talk about some of the systems or some of the processes in order to actually create engagement.
I would love to. I think this is going to fit right in with even the Go-Giver piece that you started out this morning. I think, first of all, there's connectivity. Are people connected to the big picture? And how are we doing that? So systematically, how are we talking about the vision? How are we building our strategies? How are we, as you just said, involving people in the process, so that they not only understand that there's community and then there's connectivity. Community meaning that I feel like I'm surrounded by people who will support me. There are resources, right? We share some values. We have some shared goals. There's some collaboration. So I don't feel like I'm isolated. I think that's really been part of the problem, even with pandemic and with going virtual for so long. A lot of people felt very isolated. And so how do we reconnect people? What are the systems to do that? Even how do we use technology differently so that people feel connected and that community, but also connected to the bigger picture? I think that having the conversations about not just what people are doing and why they're doing it, but the impact it's having. So let's talk about a really simple system, a feedback loop. I could say, you did a great job with this podcast. Wow, really good job. Well done. Or I could say, that podcast was well done, and here's the impact that it had on me. Here's the difference that it made for me. Here's how it changed my perspective. Here's how I have implemented and taken some action. Right. So talking not just about what people did, but talking about the difference they made in the context of the bigger picture. So that I really do believe that there's a huge chunk of humanity that will go out there today and tomorrow and the next, and they will work hard, and they will complete their tasks, and they will cross things off their to-do list, and they will go home, and they will get up and do it again the next day without really having a sense for the difference that they make, for the impact that they have. Or we could talk about a coaching system. Like, how are we coaching people? What does that conversation look like in terms of, here's where we are, here's where we're trying to go, here's some actions we could take to get there, here's how we'll know we're getting there, the measurements, right, are in place, benchmarking, and then the follow-up, right? So there's that whole the system of coaching and feedback. So I think that with engagement, there's also the idea of communication. What are our communication systems? Like, how do we what channels do we use? What rules do we use? I'm a big believer that if you want to just inform me about something, go ahead and do that in writing, right? If you're just updating, if you're just doing a data download, go ahead, give me an email, send me a fax if we still do that, right? You can text me, do it in writing. But if you want to change my heart or my mind or my behaviors or my beliefs, you're going to have to do that with the spoken word. Like, so I think one of the systems is, what channels of communication are you using intentionally and consistently? Because I think sometimes we pick the wrong channel. We pick the channel based on our convenience, it's faster, or on our comfort. I'm avoiding conflict. I'm avoiding that tough conversation or that uncomfortable, awkward feedback, right? So I think that those are examples of systems as well.
Dondi, I completely agree with you. I mean, I took some notes here because I wanted to get back to some of those points. But the last point that you brought up in terms of communication, it is so important to have a communication policy, which is an agreed upon way of how we communicate. It doesn't have to be called and in your employee handbook somewhere, but it can be a very nice, written within the words and within the culture of the organization, but really agreed on. What do we put on Slack or Teams or the instant messaging, right? Do we use people's text? I mean, do we text each other on our personal cell phones? I mean, that is also like something you need to agree on. When do we pick up the phone? Because as you said, there are so many times to actually pick up the phone and having a conversation, especially if you're remote, right? If you're not remote, in conversation in person. When do we jump on a Zoom call? Because the Zoom call is very important to actually be able to see each other, but it can also take away from the engagement. If every single little conversation will become a Zoom call, people will become disengaged as opposed to engaged. So having those clear lines in place, it is very important. And I've done it with many clients. I'm sure you go over that with your clients. It's in terms of like, let's define what are the communication channels and put the correct communication on the correct channels. So you have clarity and order.
I love that. I love the way I love that these, to me, these are operating agreements, right? They're decisions that we make before we need them. It's a little bit like sometimes you're kind of tagging on to that. Another example of communication or even coaching, like a blend of the two, is how we delegate. Like, what are we delegating? What should we be delegating? And what shouldn't we be delegating, right? And then how do we do that? How do we communicate the bigger picture and the what of it, meaning what is the desired outcome and who are the people impacted and where does this fit into the bigger picture and why are we doing this and why are we doing this right now and when do we need to be complete and when will we be sharing some milestones and then how, maybe only if necessary, right? So that in itself is like a little microcosm of a system to say, even how we communicate, delegating tasks and how we offer that. I laugh sometimes because people will say, I've asked audiences all over the world, how many of you have ever been just at your work area, you're minding your own business and your boss comes out of a meeting and your only problem is that you are the first person that they see coming out of this meeting and they have that look in their eye and that there's going to be this assignment that's coming your way right now. And while they're standing there in front of you and they're giving you the details of this project or this assignment they're delegating, you get it. But then as they walk away, you realize, I have no clue what you just said. I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing. And people will say, yes, it's like I'm in this vortex. It's like all of a sudden I have questions. And so what I say to them is that it doesn't mean that your boss is bad. It just means that they didn't hit all of those points of I call it journalism, the journalism technique of delegation, right? Who, what, when, why, where, how. And so sometimes we have to pull that out. Right? If they're not giving it to us, then we need to structure our receiving of delegation can be a system too, right? How we receive it. So that's, to me, at the corporate level or the group level, the company-wide level, we can decide in advance how do we give assignments. And
I love that. I love that.
At the individual level, we can say, how do I receive them? It's almost like a bookend approach. When I'm getting an assignment, how do I receive that so that I can really leverage the opportunity? And I can really grow inside of this project or this assignment. I can make a difference and have impact with it. I can not only meet the expectations, but I can be fully engaged.
I love that. I think it's awesome. So far, what I have in terms of the systems that you outlined. So we have the feedback, very important. We have the coaching, which I would like to touch upon it a little bit more because it also goes into mentoring. So have a system for that definitely will improve engagement. We have communication. So how do we agreements around communication, right? Like how do we communicate, on which channels, what do we communicate, in what manner? The delegation, like agreements about delegation, and how do we give the assignments, how we receive it. I love that concept for sure. I want to touch on the first one in terms of the feedback. I really love that in terms of having a system to receive and give feedback and rules and best advices around it. So it will be always constructive, right? Mm-hmm. But you can learn from it and do something from it. So it's not just giving a compliment, which is very important as well in terms of recognition. But how do you do the recognition in such a way that is meaningful and you can actually do something with it in order to either repeat the successful things that you have just done and do more of that, or correct something if it didn't come across as needed or intended, right? So I think having a system to actually give feedback from customers internally, however, like between peers, between a senior and a junior, between however it goes, like in terms of like what does your quarterly review or yearly review look like the employee review, the job assessment, whatever you want to call it, but that's part of the feedback. It has to be in such a way that it's positive, it's building, and a person walks out of the feeling empowered, right? So that will create more engagement. So I think that's spot on, Dondi.
Oh, it's so good. I really think what you all of that was very important with that last piece. I think that when you're talking about coaching and feedback, and even mentoring, it's when people leave you. To me, one of the measurements is when people leave you and you've been coaching them or giving them feedback. What are they thinking about? Are they thinking about what's next? Are they thinking about the action they can take? Are they thinking about how they can reach that next level of effectiveness? Or are they thinking about what they should have done, didn't do, feeling bad? I mean, which direction have you trained their eye? And I like the idea of using like feedback models. I really do. Like one of my favorites has always been this, like best next time. And the reason I really love it is because what you go for is a ratio of 3 to 1. And there's research based on this, right? So three things that I really appreciate about you, and one thing that would make you even more effective, right? So it might sound like what I really appreciate about you is how organized and detail oriented you are, and how you position things in such a positive way. And here's something that might make you even more effective, right? If you were to include other parts of the organization within your communication and get them involved a little earlier on, right? So, and by the way, it's really important that we don't connect those two messages with the word but. It can't be, I think you look great today, but, because that just, now you're not thinking about looking great, right? It just erased everything. So, and what I love about that system of feedback is the idea that as a leader, that causes me to look at people in a very balanced way, right? So, because I think human beings are really funny. We search for evidence to support what we already believe is true. And if I think that you are amazing, I'm going to notice every amazing thing you do. If I think you're not, then I'm going to notice all the things that you don't do, right? So it's kind of where we train our eye, what we're looking for, almost like a confirmation bias, if you will. So this system of feedback requires me as a leader to balance that out. Even if I think you're amazing, I'm still looking for what could put some top spin on the ball. What could really propel you to the next level of achievement or your next result, right? Or help you build your brand, or give you a stronger voice, help you increase your influence within the organization. Even if you're a rock star, there are things for you to learn and to grow, right? And then if I'm not enamored with you, if I'm disappointed in some way, then I still have to look for the 3 things that I like best about you. I still need to search for those things. So it causes me to be, the system asks me to be consistent in the way I view people.
That's right. So it's the consistency. It's the consistency part. I love it. That's exactly right. I mean, I love that point. Very, and the way you described.
Yeah, and I really do think, I know what I'm learning from you, and I haven't always thought of these things as systems, but they are. I mean, they really are systems when you think about it like that. So feedback systems or coaching systems. I like the idea of coming into a coaching setting with real intention. Like, what am I hoping? And I love, here's a mini system, like a little microcosm right here. Like when I go into a coaching situation, and especially if it's going to be tricky, and I feel like I'm walking a little bit of a tight wire in terms of, I do a fair amount of C-suite coaching. And sometimes that coaching is, the C-suite individual has outreach for that support. And sometimes the organization is offering that support because there's a disconnect, there's something wrong. And so sometimes I feel there's a tenuousness to it, right? I have to be really good at coaching. I have to be really good at declaring my intention. And so I ask myself 4 questions going into it. And these 4 questions kind of help me frame the conversation. I ask myself, what am I hoping this person will see or understand as a result of this conversation? What do I want them to believe as a result of this conversation? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? What is the call to action? And if I collapse those, so I might, with an embattled executive, maybe I want them to see that there's real strain within the organization, and I want them to believe that they have the ability to alter that, to change that brand, and I want them to understand that their current brand is driving relationships away versus bringing relationships to the table. And I want them to be willing to unpack that with me, right? So that almost becomes my mission in that moment, and I can have an objective. So that's a little bit of a system, right? Kind of coaching on purpose.
It's a great system because, the second part, we talked about the feedback, then, the other way of engagement is coaching and mentoring. So you just gave me the system of like, however the coaching is being done internally in the company. It might be that the executive is coaching or mentoring somebody under them. It can be an external coach, but let's say you do it internally and you want to develop a system, those 4 questions are perfect. But now I'm going to ask you, okay, so this is how me as a mentor, let's say I'm working at a company and I'm assigned a mentee, somebody I'm actually mentoring in the company. So I have my 4 questions that I'm walking into the coaching or mentoring session, right? Because I want to achieve that. What are the questions, or what are the things that the mentee should look at? So it will be a balanced system. So let's say you are mentoring me, you are the executive over the area. I am, let's say, a vice president for some department, and you're coming in and we want to discuss an issue that you want to help me be better at, or help me understand what's going on so I can improve. What do you think from the mentee side? What should we ask ourselves in order to be open for that discussion or for learning?
Oh, I think that's such a good question. First of all, I want to distinguish. I think there's a blend sometimes between coaching and mentoring. I think sometimes they dovetail each other, and the lines become very blurry. I like to say it this way, though. To me, coaching is helping someone be more effective in their current role. It's helping them to more fully own that space, to be more effective in that space. Mentoring is helping people step into the future they seek. Right? Mentoring is in the context of 1, 3, 5 years out. So I think that what you kind of described in terms of that, and I like the idea of scenario-based mentoring, where as a protege or a mentee, I can come to you and I can sit down and say, here is a situation that's difficult, tricky. I feel like I'm not getting any traction here, and the mentee can bring those scenarios to the table. And I think what's really important for the mentor is to work with that scenario in the context of future goals, right? So how does this, so for example, mentees need to come to the table saying, I'm trying to be more strategic. I'm trying to increase my influence. I'm trying to build a brand that will really make me the natural choice for the opportunities I seek. And this scenario seems like a good one to unpack and practice some of those things. I'm not feeling that I have the influence that I should be having on this project or with this team or with this customer. And I'd like to roll that by you. And so I do, as you know, I do a lot of work around mentoring, and I create mentoring tools for the Fortune 100. And one of the things we talk about is even a little bit of a test, like a little survey, right? Maybe you can create a mentor-mentee, survey to say what makes a great protege. Am I open to feedback? Am I going to do the work? Am I going to put things into action? Am I going to try things out? Am I going to be willing to take a little risk? Am I going to be authentic? Am I going to make myself vulnerable to this situation? Because I don't have to show up. This isn't a job interview, right? This is really about reaching for new ways and new approaches. It's about taking a little bit of a risk. And then on the mentor side, part of the system, systematizing it is how can you design some meaningful experiences that cause me to step out of my comfort zone as a protege, that cause me to reach for, practice, demonstrate a skill, that ask me to practice something, right? To practice, maybe off Broadway, and get feedback and reach for that feedback. And follow up with you, right? So I think that mentees need to have a very clear idea of where they want to be in the future and how this current reality, where they are currently, and then really try to figure out what are the steps, what are the gaps, what are the skill gaps, what are the perspective gaps, what are the experience gaps, what are the results gaps. So they need to be able to identify, here's where I am right now, here's what I love about it, here's what I don't love about it. Here's what's challenging, motivating, meaningful. Here's what's boring. Here's what's horrifying about it. Here's who my peers are, who I interact with the most. And now, fast forward 1, 3, 5 years. These are my peers. This is the impact I'm having. This is the brand that I have built. This is what I'm known for, right? And then now the idea, the system is to break that down and say, what are the gaps between there and here? What are those gaps?
That is an amazing system. Great. I mean, that is fantastic. That's definitely will bring engagement, so I can see it like if I'm because I always try to break it down into the steps, and let's see how we incorporate it and make sure that we're doing all the steps. So we have the feedback, we have the coaching system, and then we have the mentoring system, which I can see that they are different. The coaching will be for situations that are happening now in the present to get better at. Mentoring will be like really mentor for the future, creating that future. So it's very important in terms of engagement that there is a future. There is.
Oh, I agree. I think mentoring is one of the most powerful things that organizations can do to fuel engagement. And really, the other thing I'll throw out there is this idea of community. It's one of the reasons why I love the Go Giver community. If you can wrap community around anything, you're probably going to amplify or magnify the efforts or the results, right, in the messaging. So one of the things that my organization has been really, really working on, we design mentoring communities around the world, right? So people are partnered up, but once a month, there's a community call. And those proteges and those mentors get on that call, that Zoom or that straight up conference call, and they come prepared to talk about, here's something that we've been working on. Here's something that seems to be a barrier. Here's something we're doing about that. We want some advice, or we want to share a success, right? So that community call can be very powerful as well.
Absolutely. And I was just looking because I did a podcast with the CEO of Ruby. It's ruby.com. Kate Winkler, and she was talking about how they created those communities in order to keep their employees engaged. And that was one of my past podcasts, but it was a great example of what you're describing right now, how you create that community around common subjects that people are interested in. to create that engagement, but it has to be also a safe space for them to communicate. It has to be a place where they feel interested and they're drawn and they're heard. They can learn from others, but they're also heard. So you have that balance.
Mm-hmm. I do like, I keep, that seems to be a little bit of a theme with this conversation, is that balance, the balance between giving and receiving feedback, the balance between delegating and how I receive delegation, the balance between how we communicate and how we pull people into the communication, the balance between talking and being heard, right? I do think that what I'm learning here, what I'm noticing is that if a system is balanced, it's probably going to be more successful.
I think so. And it goes into, we mentioned Bob and the go-giver. I mean, there has to be a balance. You can't just give and not be able to receive, right? I mean,
right.
It's like it has to go both ways, because if I just give and I never be willing to receive anything, then you basically don't let people reciprocate with you. And that becomes, they don't feel comfortable with it. So I think it has to go both ways to be successful, because even with the feedback, you have to be willing to receive it, but you have to also give it in such a way that it can be received, right?
Oh yeah, so that people can be receptive, so that we don't increase defensiveness. And I think for me, another like tiny little system for that, lowering resistance, is and creating more buy-in, is to do a couple things. Talk about what you want instead of what you don't want. Like, so when we say to people, don't be late, like, or to our kids, don't be late, don't get dirty, why wouldn't we say, stay clean, stay dry, be on time? Why do we talk about what we don't want, or talk about what you are instead of what you aren't? Like, I'm not good at this, or maybe how about I'm getting better at, I'm learning to. I always laugh because I collect signs. If I can put it in my travels, and I will steal them if I can get a hold of them. I will take it. Not like a stop sign, right? Not like that, but in Manhattan, in this, I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm going to get it if it's still there the next time I go. There's a dry cleaner, and there's a sign on the dry cleaner, and it's just taped up, just a piece of paper like printed off of a home computer, and it says something like, "We close every day at 9 p.m." And that sign's driving me crazy, because why wouldn't you talk about what you aren't? Why wouldn't you say
we open until 9
a.m. or 9 p.m.? Why would we talk about what we aren't? I'm gonna swap it. I'm stealing that one, and I'm gonna swap. Or like, if you go into a hotel and it says that whole, all of the items in your room have been carefully inventoried, and all the missing items will be added to your bill. Like, okay, that just makes me want to take a towel. It really just dares me to take a towel. But in a hotel that has a sign that says, the bathrobe is here for your convenience and comfort. And if you love it and you'd like to take it with you, please let us know. We'd like to wrap it for you, and we'll include it on your final statement. Both of those are saying the same thing, right? Both of them, if you take this, you're paying for it. But one of them invites me to buy it, and one of them dares me to steal it. And I just think it kind of gets back to the communication ground rules we were talking about earlier. Talk about what you want, talk about what you are, and here's the last one. This is magical. Talk about what you can do. There may be 1,000 things I can't do for you as a supervisor or manager or an executive, or even talking to a client. There might be 1,000 things I can't do for you in this situation, but I'm going to focus on here's what I can.
Amazing. Dondi, this conversation, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners did as well, because there are so many things that can be applied. And I'm sure that list of what else can we do in order to increase engagement and support engagement and foster engagement can definitely go on and on. There are many more things, but I think we got the main ones. And it's been fantastic to talk to you, with you, to hear you, to listen. Definitely, I learned so much. So if our listeners would like to contact you, work with you, how do they get a hold of you?
My name, DondiScumaci.com. Anywhere you go, like Dondi Scumaci Twitter, Dondi Scumaci LinkedIn, and then of course my website, which is just my name, DondiScumaci.com. There's some good resources up there too. And by the way, for your listeners, if they want to read the first chapter of my last book, Career Moves, that's available to them in a PDF. They can download the first chapter. You don't have to do anything to get that. Sign in, sign up, nothing. You just download it and enjoy it. I hope that.
And I'm actually going to include it in the podcast notes, so it will be very easy to get a hold of. And of course, your book's on Amazon. So no lack of places to connect with Dondi, and I highly recommend it because I can honestly talk to you for hours, and we're probably gonna. It will be so kind record future podcasts because I have so many questions and so many more topics, but I think I like to keep those to a certain amount of time so our listeners can get what they need from this one or what they want, and then move to the next episodes that we're going to record in the future. So thank you so much, Dondi, for being here. It was a pleasure interviewing you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to checking out all of the other episodes.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.